property in Shepherdstown for our newest elementary school. I wanted to give you a brief history of how we reached this point, and then Mr. Randy Jones, our chief architect, is going to give you some financial information, and then Ms. Joyce White is going to give you a quick snapshot of where we are in the process right now. So, first of all, some of you have been at this since the beginning. I see Mr. Burgess out here when I first came. Within the first, I think, 30 days, he came to me and said, one of the things that you need to do is get some land out of Shepherdstown to go to new school. We quickly, the second semester of that year, got started on a very long process. One of the first things that we did, and I brought a lot of documentation for you, but is that we went through a process that heat mapped all of Jefferson County based on growth. We sat down and met with the Planning Commission and created a series of heat maps for folks where folks had paid for residential permits, so we know where the growth was going to come. We then met with an organization, Thrashers, who very generously provided us with free services to look at site selection analysis and evaluation. We went through a series of rubrics to look at what type of land we want, what we needed to have in that land to save the taxpayers the maximum amount of money in terms of the conditions of the land, mapping potential sites. They then provided us with a report. They went and located every single parcel of land in this county large enough to place a school on, did an analysis of all of them in a rubric. The board reviewed those. At that time, the property that we purchased initially was our Ransom property. Once we completed that, we then went back to the drawing board and began looking for Shepherdstown properties that met our needs. We were very blessed to have, I see Mr. Adam Shive here this evening, and he was instrumental in helping us locate properties in the Shepherdstown area, and then he, as Jefferson citizens often are, was very, very generous in that he forewent the proceeds of having brokered and negotiated that sale in support of Shepherdstown's and Jefferson County's children. Following the purchase of that land, we then embarked on a pretty significant 2-year public input period, during which we formed a set of committees. Those committees were made up of school staff, community members, several of them actually had students on them, and they looked at different aspects of the property and schools that we needed. Each one of them then reported out. At the same time, we also put out an electronic survey for parents for them to give us feedback on what they wanted to see on the land, how they wanted to see it configured, what programs they wanted. We took all of that information, we collated it, we brought it to the board. They made additions, changes. Then we went back out, took all of that information in a series of public meetings that we held, again, to give everyone the outcomes from all of those committee meetings. We held them at Shepherdstown Elementary, we held them at Wright Denny Elementary, we held them at Wildwood Middle School, we held them at Branson, and citizens came and gave us input. We then went back to the board again to put that into a CEFP. The board put it back out again for review. It came back again. They voted for it. It then went before the voters of Jefferson County. The voters of Jefferson County, we were very blessed this past November. They voted overwhelmingly 2-1 to provide the funding for a bond that within that there was $16 million specifically allocated for a brand new Shepherdstown Elementary School on the property we had purchased. We then subsequently put together a case and went to the school building authority in Charleston, and were blessed. We had 42 applicants. Of those, 7 of them were awarded funding, and we were one of the 7, and we were the only ones who got the full funding amount of our request. They added another $7 million on top of that. So we got to this point, and I will turn it over to Mr. Randy Jones real quick to talk about some fiscal analysis of the options that we had.
Thank you, Dr. Gibson. It's good to see you all tonight. As Dr. Gibson said, we went through the CEFP process, which is required by the West Virginia School Building Authority to be done every 10 years. And part of that analysis is to look at each school facility in the county and determine what renovations will be needed over the next 10 years so that we can plan for it, we can seek funding for it, and so forth. At Shepherdstown Middle School, we identified just $2.7 million in renovations that would need to be done in the next 2 years, in the next 10 years to keep that as an operational middle school. I've been doing school design for, it's hard to believe, it's been 30 years, and I've gotten a lot of requests to look at converting middle schools to elementary schools. And generally that is not a successful endeavor because they're so different. With elementary schools, you have little 4-year-olds. They have height challenges. The marker boards are not the right height. The restroom facilities are not the right location. So there's a challenge just in converting a space like that into an elementary school. In addition, we've gone through the educational specs and programming for the new Shepherdstown Elementary School. And if we were to take that program and insert that into Shepherdstown Middle School, we would have to do a significant addition that would include at least 4 classrooms, a stage, a STEM lab, and a greenhouse. All these things combined, and including the loss of the SBA funding that we were graciously awarded, would leave us with a deficit of $10 to $12 million if we were to basically swap out cleaning the elementary at the middle school site and building a new middle school. So that's kind of where we are. I wanted to keep it brief, but Joyce, I think you can probably add some additional information to that.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. So currently we are in the planning phase of building a school. We're excited at Jefferson County Schools to provide the students of Shepherdstown with a brand new facility. We have heard concerns regarding the walking district in Shepherdstown. There are eligible walkers in Shepherdstown Elementary. There are 40 eligible walkers. Of the eligible walkers, we have 10 students that are taking advantage of walking out of a population of 430 students. In the planning phase thus far, we've involved the staff in an education specification committee. They have very wisely, as the experts in the school system, decided what spaces need to be in the school, and they've worked with an architect to do so. Our next steps this fall will need to involve the children. The children have a voice in our community, and they are the reason we do our work. So we want to hear from children about what they would like to see in their spaces and in their school. So that's where we are in the planning process as we have kicked off this very exciting project. Thank you.
Is there any other information that you would like from us, sir?
The council, we invited them to speak, so if there are questions. Now, I did send out twice asking if you had any questions for Dr. Gibson.
Thank you, sir.
And nobody forwarded me any questions. So, I think that's it.
I have a question based on what I heard tonight. Did you say that the SBA funding that was obtained has been withdrawn or lost? Is that?
No, sir. I believe that the statement was around because we understand that there is a question in the community about whether or not at this point, given everything that's come before, we could swap and then repurpose Shepherdstown Middle School as an elementary and build Shepherdstown Middle School. First and foremost, you could use none of the money from the bond. The thousands and thousands of Jefferson citizens who voted for that voted for very specific language in that bond, and we don't have the legal authority to abrogate that. So that money would no longer exist. So there would be no funding either from the bond or from the $7 million in SBA money that we were also awarded that also was specified regarding that CEFP, which was approved by WVDE. So at this point, it's not a legal possibility for us to make that change and retain that funding. It's not.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Joyce?
Joyce.
Yes.
Thank you,
Very
ma'am.
welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, what I'm gonna do is have the, sir, you just came in?